Well, it appeared that all just sort of came together.
For decades, Willie Nelson carried a secret that clawed at him like a thorn he couldn't pull out. Friends knew him as the man with the braids, the endless grin, the guitar named Trigger, and a laugh that could fill an empty hall. But behind the haze of stage lights and the smell of cedar smoke, something heavier followed him. The weight had a name, Kris Kristofferson. When news broke that Kris had passed, Willie couldn't stop the storm inside. He stepped away from the microphones and the tour buses, sat beneath a Texas sky, and finally said the words he'd avoided for a lifetime. Kris wasn't just a friend or a songwriting partner. He was the reason Willie survived nights so dark they seemed carved from despair. Willie admitted he hated himself for never speaking the full truth while Kris was alive. "I should have told him," he whispered to a close confidant. I owed him that. But secrets can be cruel companions. They settle into the soul, stubborn and silent. And Willie, the eternal outlaw, knew that some confessions don't arrive until the person you love is gone. This is the story of a boy abandoned in the crushing years of the Great Depression, a child who learned to patch freezing walls with newspaper, a prodigy who played honky-tonks before he could shave. It's the story of a man who found salvation in a battered guitar and a friendship that changed the rhythm of his heart. And it begins long before the world called him a legend. Willie Hugh Nelson entered the world on April 29, 1933, in the tiny speck of Abbott, Texas, a town so small you could walk its length in the time it takes a song to fade. Barely 300 souls called it home. It was a hard season to arrive. America was gasping under the Great Depression. Factories shuttered. 1 in every 4 workers had no job. Trains rumbled past, loaded with the restless unemployed. Dust storms scoured the plains. In farm towns like Abbott, people stretched beans and bread as far as they could go. Babies came into the world wrapped not just in blankets, but in worry. Willie's family felt that worry every single day. The Nelsons owned more grit than money. His mother, Merle, chased odd jobs where she could find them. His father, Ira, worked when work existed. Even so, the promise of a steady future was as thin as the morning mist on the cotton fields. Before Willie could even form a memory, loss introduced itself. At 6 months old, he watched, though he wouldn't remember, his mother leave in search of work and never come back. Letters didn't follow. Neither did footsteps. A few months later, his father drifted off the same way, swallowed by the need to survive. The Nelson children, Willie and his older sister Bobby, were left with only the steady hands of their grandparents, Nancy and Alfred. Alfred worked as a blacksmith, bending iron with the patience of a saint. Nancy taught piano to neighborhood kids and prayed as if the world depended on each whispered word. Though they never complained, the truth was clear. They were dirt poor. Nights were so cold that Nancy pasted newspaper against the walls to keep the wind from whistling through the cracks. The smell of ink and dust clung to their little house, a strange perfume of desperation. Abandonment could have broken Willie. Instead, it built a quiet strength. In that fragile household, love came not from abundance but from resilience. By 7, Willie was picking cotton under the Texas sun, the hot soil searing his bare feet as he dragged a sack almost as long as he was tall. Each pound of white fluff earned a few precious pennies that helped put food on the table. School waited until after the fields, a pattern that taught him endurance before he understood the word. Then sickness struck. In 1940, pneumonia swept through Texas like a thief in the night. Children were the easiest prey. Willie's fever spiked, his breaths turned shallow, and the family feared the worst. Medicine was scarce and expensive. Neighbors whispered that many kids never woke again. But Willie clung to life, stubborn even in sickness. He carried that toughness into every challenge that followed. The winters were merciless. The family's small house groaned against the north wind. Some nights, Willie lay awake listening to paper crackle on the walls, a thin shield against the cold. Hunger was an old acquaintance. He learned early how to stretch a meager meal and how to smile through a growling stomach. Yet even amid hardship, the boy's heart beat to a rhythm larger than struggle. Music was already calling. When Willie turned 6, Alfred handed him a guitar that cost almost nothing but felt like treasure. The wood smelled of pine and possibility. Willie's small fingers fumbled across the strings until a sound, rough, sweet, alive, filled the room. Something clicked. By 7, he was writing songs. The first was a little gospel tune, simple and heartfelt, the kind a small Methodist church might hum on a warm Sunday. Though the classic Pretty Paper would come decades later, those early notes carried the seed of everything he'd become. By 10, the boy in dusty overalls was performing in local bars, standing on a chair so the crowd could see him. He earned more than most adults made in the cotton fields. Grown men tossed coins into his open case, marveling at the child who could strum heartache out of 6 strings. Music gave him a way to survive and to dream. Nancy Nelson's faith was as sturdy as the old Methodist church in Abbott. Built back in 1899, she believed dancing tempted the devil and that Saturday night beer could burn a soul. Every Sunday, Willie sang in the choir, his voice angelic enough to make the congregation weep. But outside the church doors, another side of him emerged. He sneaked sips of beer behind the barn. He bummed cigarettes from field hands and felt a rush of guilt every time smoke curled into the sky. He was sure he'd booked himself a one-way ticket to hell. On the radio, Bob Wills and his Texas Playboys played a different gospel, one of swing, fiddle, and outlaw joy. Willie soaked it up in secret, ears pressed to the speaker. Years later, in a twist only life could write, he bought that very church to keep it from being shuttered, honoring both the faith that raised him and the music that tempted him. Then came the heartbreak that carved itself into his soul. In 1939, when Willie was only 6, Alfred, the man who had placed that life-changing guitar in his hands, died of pneumonia. It felt like losing a father, a teacher, a best friend in one cruel blow. The house seemed quieter, the nights colder. Willie was forced to grow harder, to work longer hours milking cows before school, to lean on a strength far beyond his years. Grief has a way of shaping a person's edges. For Willie, it ignited a stubborn independence and planted the first seeds of the outlaw spirit that would later define him. By 17, Willie longed to see more than Abbott's dusty streets. In 1950, diploma in hand, he enlisted in the U.S. Air Force, imagining a life of discipline and flight. But fate had other plans. Within 9 months, a back injury from lifting heavy equipment forced a medical discharge. His dream of military service ended as abruptly as it began. Suddenly, he was adrift. No job, no savings, just the echo of possibility. Where others might have surrendered, Willie turned to the one thing that never betrayed him: music. He played tiny Texas bars, slept in borrowed rooms, and scribbled lyrics on scraps of paper. Every setback became a verse, every lonely mile a melody. In 1956, chasing a flicker of opportunity, Willie moved to Vancouver, Washington, far from the heat of Texas. He found work as a radio DJ at a station called K-Van. The booth smelled of warm tubes and coffee grounds. Between spinning records for late-night listeners, he picked up his guitar and recorded his first single, No Place for Me, with Lumberjack on the flip side. Money was scarce, so Willie did what he always did: he hustled. He created his own tiny label, Willie Nelson Records, pressed the vinyl himself, and sold each copy alongside autographed photos for $1. That homemade record didn't make him famous overnight, but it marked the beginning of a career that would eventually reshape American music. More than that, it proved something to himself, that a boy once abandoned in a small Texas town could carve a life from pure determination and the stubborn magic of song. Through every triumph and heartbreak, one truth remained. Kris Kristofferson was the friend who stood closest to the shadows Willie sometimes walked through. Long before the world knew of their bond, Kris listened when Willie's demons grew loud, but Willie never found the courage to say how deeply that friendship saved him. Only after Kris was gone did the words tumble out, heavy and late. "He kept me alive," Willie confessed. "I should have told him." It is a confession stitched with regret, yet illuminated by gratitude. Willie Nelson's life, from an abandoned child of the Depression to an icon of American music, is proof that secrets can shape us as surely as songs. And though he waited too long to speak, his music carries the echo of everything he felt, but never said. By the early 1960s, Willie Nelson was restless. Texas honky-tonks had sharpened his voice and his guitar skills, but the center of country music lived hundreds of miles away in Nashville. In 1960, he packed a battered suitcase, slung his guitar across his back, and headed east. Nashville welcomed him politely, but only as a songwriter. His own voice, with its slightly behind-the-beat phrasing, sounded too unconventional for the polished radio sound of the day. Yet the songs pouring from his pen were undeniable. Within a few years, he'd written Crazy, which Patsy Cline turned into a classic, Nightlife, Funny How Time Slips Away, and a dozen others that became standards. Willie should have felt triumphant. Instead, he felt invisible. Other artists climbed the charts with his music while he scraped by, performing in smoky clubs for pocket change. The city that promised success gave him royalty checks but little recognition. In quiet moments, he wondered if the world would ever hear his voice. The frustration deepened when personal disasters struck. A fire destroyed his Tennessee home, reducing keepsakes and instruments to ash. Record deals came and went, each one promising a breakthrough and ending in disappointment. Debt began to shadow him like an unwelcome ghost. Then came the decision that would change everything. Willie left Nashville and went home to Texas. He grew his hair long, shed the rhinestone suits, and embraced a looser, rough-edged sound. In Austin's beer-soaked clubs, he found an audience that craved exactly what he offered: raw honesty and music that blended country with blues, folk, and rock. The move wasn't just geographic. It was spiritual. Nashville's loss became Texas's revolution. In Texas, Willie met kindred spirits: Waylon Jennings, Jesse Coulter, and Tom Paul Glazer. Together, they formed the nucleus of what became known as outlaw country, a rebellion against Nashville's slick production. Their 1976 album, Wanted. The Outlaws shocked the industry by going platinum, the first country album to do so. Willie's own Red-Headed Stranger, recorded with a sparse, haunting sound, proved a massive hit. Suddenly, the man once dismissed as too odd was a superstar. The braids, the bandanas, and the weathered guitar trigger became symbols of freedom, not eccentricity. Through the late 70s and 80s, Willie's fame soared. Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain, On the Road Again, and Always on My Mind became anthems, earning him Grammys and filling arenas. He organized the first Farm Aid concert in 1985 with Neil Young and John Mellencamp, raising millions for struggling farmers and showing that his heart was as big as his voice. Hollywood noticed, too. Willie acted in films, hosted variety shows, and became a beloved face of American music culture, half poet, half outlaw. But success didn't shield him from trouble. His personal life remained complicated: multiple marriages, divorces, and family sorrows that rarely made the headlines. Then in 1990, the IRS dropped a bomb. Willie owed more than $16 million in unpaid taxes. Agents seized his homes, recording studio and even personal possessions. Many would have broken under that weight. Willie turned crisis into creativity, releasing the IRS tapes. Who'll Buy My Memories? An acoustic collection sold directly to fans. Slowly, with relentless touring and loyal supporters, he paid every penny. The episode only deepened the public's admiration. The outlaw had fought the government and paid his dues with a grin. The decades that followed saw Willie collaborating with everyone from Ray Charles to Norah Jones to Snoop Dogg. He championed marijuana legalization long before it was fashionable and remained the heart of Farm Aid year after year. Younger artists viewed him not just as a legend but as a bridge between eras, a living lesson in authenticity. Through it all, his friendship with Kris Kristofferson endured as one of the quiet pillars of his life, a reminder of nights spent swapping songs and secrets long before fame or fortune. Now well into his 90s, Willie Nelson still steps onto stages with trigger slung low, his voice weathered but strong. He speaks softly about the friends who've passed: Waylon, Merle Haggard, and finally Kris. When asked about regrets, he always circles back to that one confession he wished he'd made while Kris could still hear it. "I think about him every show," Willie has said. I carry him with me in every note. The boy who once patched walls with newspaper has become an enduring American icon. His life, marked by poverty, rebellion, triumph, and heartfelt music, proves that truth can wait a lifetime to be sung, but when it finally finds its melody, it lasts forever. Even as the calendar flipped into the 2000s, Willie refused to slow down. While many of his peers retired to quiet ranches, he toured relentlessly, logging hundreds of shows a year. His voice, soft, behind the beat, and instantly recognizable, gained a deeper warmth with age. Fans marveled that the man who once sang in Abbott's Little Methodist Church could still fill arenas with a single note. He often joked that constant performing was his secret to staying alive. "If you keep moving," he'd say with a twinkle, "death can't catch you." Willie never cared about genre fences. One month he was cutting a jazz standards album, the next he was trading verses with rockers or hip-hop artists. His 2002 record, The Great Divide, featured duets with everyone from Sheryl Crow to Kid Rock. Later came projects with Wynton Marsalis, Norah Jones, and even rap icon Snoop Dogg, proof that his curiosity remained boundless. Critics sometimes scratched their heads, but Willie shrugged. "A good song's a good song," he'd say. "Doesn't matter where it comes from." Willie's compassion stretched far beyond music. He continued to champion farm aid, raising millions for family farmers year after year. He became one of the most visible advocates for marijuana legalization, speaking not just about personal freedom, but about the plant's medical and economic potential. When natural disasters struck, hurricanes, wildfires, he quietly organized benefits, lent his name, and showed up guitar in hand. To Willie, activism wasn't politics. It was neighborly duty. Behind the public grin, life still brought heartbreak. Willie endured the pain of losing loved ones, including his son Billy in 1991, a wound that never fully healed. Yet his family remained his anchor. Bobby, the sister who shared those hard-scrabble Abbott days, toured with him for decades on piano until her passing in 2022. On stage, he often glanced her way, the silent bond between them stronger than any lyric. "She kept me grounded," he'd tell friends. From day one, as the years rolled on, accolades poured in: Grammys, Kennedy Center honors, the Gershwin Prize for Popular Song, induction into the Country Music Hall of Fame, and even a Library of Congress Lifetime Achievement Award. Presidents shook his hand. Fellow musicians called him a national treasure, yet Willie remained disarmingly humble. "Awards are nice," he'd quip, "but I'd rather be on the bus playing music." Into his 90s, Willie continued touring with a schedule that would exhaust artists half his age. Fans across the world, grandparents and teenagers alike, gathered to hear classics like "On the Road Again," often singing louder than the band. Each concert felt like a family reunion, a celebration of resilience and song. He often ended shows by tipping his hat and saying, "See you down the road," as if eternity itself were just another tour stop. No matter how high the accolades piled, Willie never stopped carrying Kris Kristofferson's memory. When asked in recent interviews about regrets, his eyes softened. "Kris saved me more than once," he'd whisper. I hope he knows it now. In every performance of For the Good Times, listeners swear they can hear a quiet dedication, a musical letter to a lost friend, finally spoken through melody. Today, Willie lives on his beloved Texas ranch, still writing songs, still recording, still planning the next tour. He tends to horses at dawn, strums trigger beneath wide skies, and greets each sunrise with the calm of a man who's seen the full circle of life. Asked about the secret to his endurance, he smiles. Keep playing. Keep loving. And don't let the music stop. For Willie Nelson, the road truly never ends. His journey, from an abandoned Depression-era baby to an American legend, reminds us that art, friendship, and stubborn hope can outlast time itself. Long before critics coined the phrase outlaw country, Willie was already bending the rules of rhythm and melody. His guitar, Trigger, a battered Martin N20 with a hole worn through the body, became an extension of his soul. Unlike most country pickers, Willie used complex, jazz-inspired chord progressions and a behind-the-beat vocal phrasing that felt almost like a conversation. He treated time as elastic, letting syllables hang in the air a heartbeat longer, then catching up with a sly grin. Musicians still study those recordings the way poets study verse, marveling at how something so relaxed can feel so precise. Trigger, scarred but singing, is more than an instrument. It's a living diary of every stage, bus ride, and midnight jam across decades. People often ask how Willie has endured a century of triumphs and trials without losing his easy smile. He credits a daily practice of quiet reflection, a mix of meditation, prayer, and old-fashioned gratitude. Friends say he reads spiritual texts from many traditions, finding wisdom in the Bible, Buddhist teachings, and even cowboy poetry. His approach is simple. Don't dwell on yesterday. Don't fear tomorrow. Play the song you're in. That philosophy turned hardships, IRS battles, personal losses, endless touring, into moments of growth rather than bitterness. It's the calm of a man who understands that music and kindness outlast every storm. Willie's reach extends far beyond country music. Rock legends like Bob Dylan, Neil Young, and the Grateful Dead have praised his storytelling. Hip-hop producers sample his licks. Indie folk artists borrow his phrasing. Tribute albums appear from every genre. Jazz quartets, punk bands, bluegrass pickers, all drawn to the honesty in his songs. Documentaries and films revisit his life again and again, each generation discovering that the quiet rebel from Abbott, Texas, helped redraw the American musical map. When younger stars share a stage with him, they don't just see a legend, they see proof that authenticity never goes out of style. Willie's outlaw spirit shows up in business, too. In the early 2000s, he launched Bio Willie, a biodiesel company promoting clean, renewable fuel long before green energy was fashionable. The idea grew from long nights on the tour bus, when he wondered why trucks hauling produce couldn't run on something kinder to the planet. He's invested in sustainable farming, small ranch operations, and community projects that blend environmental care with old-fashioned neighborliness. To Willie, it isn't politics. It's common sense. Leave the earth better than you found it, he says, and play a good tune while you're at it. Willie's storytelling doesn't stop at melody. He's written several books, including the acclaimed memoir It's a Long Story, My Life, and the reflective Roll Me Up and Smoke Me When I Die. These works read like late-night conversations on a front porch, humorous, confessional, and wise. They reveal a man who sees no line between song lyrics and prose. Both are simply ways to tell the truth. Fans say reading his books feels like hearing a brand new Willie Nelson album, only with the music tucked between the sentences. Life on the road remains Willie's heartbeat. His tour bus, outfitted more like a rolling home than a star's palace, carries guitars, family photos, and the smell of fresh coffee. Willie's Roadhouse, his SiriusXM channel, keeps fans company wherever highways stretch. Band members become family, sharing jokes and card games as the miles pass. Even at venues he's played a dozen times, he greets each crowd as if it's his first night back in Abbott. Humble, curious, ready to trade stories in song. Awards have piled up like postcards from a life well-traveled. Multiple Grammys across 5 decades. The Kennedy Center Honors, the Gershwin Prize for Popular Song, a spot in the Country Music Hall of Fame, and the Library of Congress Living Legend Award. Presidents shake his hand. Young musicians call him mentor. Yet he accepts every accolade with a soft laugh and a shrug. A trophy's just something else to dust, he says. For Willie, the real honor is hearing fans sing along to a chorus he wrote half a century ago. Today, Willie's catalog, thousands of songs deep, streams to listeners around the globe. From rural cafes in Texas to bustling streets in Tokyo, his records continue to climb charts decades after release. Proof that heartfelt music doesn't age. Younger artists cover his classics, while filmmakers weave his tunes into soundtracks that introduce him to new audiences. Every note carries the warmth of Abbott's dusty fields and the resilience of a boy who once patched his walls with newspaper. And still, Each evening, Willie picks up Trigger, leans into the mic, and offers the same gentle promise. As long as there's a song to sing, I'll be right here. If you lined up every artist Willie has shared a microphone with, the list would look like a map of modern music. From Ray Charles and Merle Haggard to Norah Jones, Casey Musgraves, and even Snoop Dogg, Willie treats every duet as a conversation between equals. His voice, weathered, warm, unmistakably Willie, blends with jazz greats, rock icons, and newcomers half his age as if they were all gathered in the same small Texas bar. The magic lies in his generosity. He never tries to outshine a partner. He simply listens, finds the pocket, and lets the song breathe. Each collaboration is a quiet reminder that music has no borders. Willie's heart for justice has always been as strong as his love of melody. In 1985, watching small farmers lose their land, he founded Farm Aid with Neil Young and John Mellencamp. What began as a single benefit concert has grown into an annual lifeline, raising millions to keep family farms alive. He speaks just as passionately about criminal justice reform and the right to responsibly use cannabis, long before it was a popular cause. To Willie, these efforts aren't politics. They're about compassion and community. He once said, helping people isn't a side job. It's part of the music. Willie's presence on screen is as easy and natural as his music. He's acted in more than 30 films: Honeysuckle Rose, The Electric Horseman, Stagecoach, and even quirky cameos in modern comedies. Directors love the quiet authority he brings. Audiences love that twinkle in his eye that says he's in on the joke. His songs appear in hundreds of soundtracks, from sweeping westerns to indie dramas, each guitar note carrying the scent of open roads and endless skies. When a Willie Nelson tune drifts through a scene, it instantly feels more human. Behind every show stands the family band, a circle of musicians who've traveled with him for decades. Sister Bobby, until her passing, held the piano bench with unmatched grace. Players like Mickey Raphael on harmonica and Paul English on drums became more than colleagues. They were brothers and sisters in spirit. Long nights on the road turned into a lifetime of shared laughter, stories, and music. Their bond is the heartbeat of every concert, proof that friendship can be the strongest rhythm section of all. Though he's rooted in Texas soil, Willie's music belongs to the world. He's played stages from Tokyo to Berlin, where audiences who barely speak English still know every line of On the Road Again. His gentle phrasing and timeless themes, love, loss, freedom, need no translation. In distant countries, fans wear cowboy hats and sing along, their voices carrying the universal truth Willie has always lived by. A good song speaks every language. As Willie moves through his 10th decade, archivists and historians work to preserve his vast body of work. The Willie Nelson and Friends Museum in Nashville and a growing archive in Texas safeguard guitars, handwritten lyrics, and rare recordings. Digital remasters ensure that future generations will hear Trigger's warm tone exactly as it rang in smoky honky-tonks half a century ago. It's not a monument to a past era. It's a living library of music that still grows every time he steps on stage. Today, when Willie walks onto a stage, braids, bandana, and that beloved guitar, time seems to fold in on itself. Fans who discovered him in the 1960s stand shoulder to shoulder with teenagers who found him on streaming playlists last week. He strums a single chord and the crowd falls quiet, united by something deeper than nostalgia. It's the sound of a life lived fully, a reminder that kindness and courage can echo for generations. Willie Nelson isn't just a country singer. He's proof that music at its best is a lifelong conversation, one he's still happily having with the world.